Hey solo gamers, thanks for checking out How's It Play Solo. I'm Mac Kern, and today I'm taking a look at Terraforming Mars, which is a tableau building and tile laying game for 1 to 5 players. There are 2 included variants to control the length of the game. The longer of those 2 is called the corporate age, and whenever you play the game solo, you always use the corporate age setup. I'm going to take a look at the multiplayer rules and idea of the game, and then I'm going to dive into the solo experience. Let's check it out. In Terraforming Mars, you play as a corporation working to convert the surface of the planet of Mars so that it's inhabitable by human life. And you do that by raising 3 parameters over the course of the game. So you have the temperature, which you're trying to raise to 8 degrees Celsius. You have the oxygen level, which you're trying to raise to 14%. And then you also place oceans. You have to place 9 oceans on the board over the course of the game. In the multiplayer game, the game doesn't end until all 3 of those parameters have been fully satisfied. You play the game over a series of rounds, which are called generations, and you track those generations on the scoring track. And another thing that you track is your terraform rating, which in the multiplayer game starts at 20. Your terraform rating affects how much money you make during the production phase, and it also affects your score at the end of the game. Every time you increase one of these parameters, so every time you raise the temperature or place an ocean tile or increase the oxygen, your terraform rating also goes up at that time. There are 6 standard resources in Terraforming Mars, and you keep track of those on a personal player mat. This mat keeps track of the number of resources that you currently have, and it also keeps track of how many of each resource you'll produce during the production phase of each generation. The way that you keep track of the resources that you actually have is with these different colors of cubes. So the bronze cube is worth 1, the silver is 5, and the gold is 10. This resource is called mega credits. That's the unit of currency in the game. So this would be 16 mega credits if it was sitting right here. You also have steel, which can be used as money when you're paying for building cards, which are cards that have this little brown logo on them. Steel is worth 2 mega credits a piece when you're paying for building cards. Titanium is similar to steel. You can use that when you're paying for space cards with this little star icon. When you're doing that, titanium is worth 3 mega credits a piece. You have plants, which can be converted to greenery tiles on the board. You have energy, which can sometimes be used to pay for actions, and it also turns into heat later in the game. And heat is the final resource, which can be spent to raise the temperature. At the beginning of the game, each player is dealt 2 corporation cards, and they choose one that they want to start the game with. These cards determine your starting resources and provide you with a personal action or ongoing effect that can help shape your strategy over the course of the game. After you choose the corporation that you want to play and take your starting resources, you draw 10 project cards from the deck, and you choose which ones you want to keep in your starting hand by paying 3 mega credits per card. Now, since that can be a little overwhelming for new players, they've also included some beginner corporations. They're all the same. They all provide you with 42 credits, and you get to draw 10 cards for free so that new players aren't forced to evaluate which cards they want to start the game with. And these cards can be used while other experienced players are using the advanced corporation cards as well. Each generation consists of 4 phases. In the first phase, you pass the starting player marker to the left. In the second phase, called Research, each player draws 4 cards, and then just like at the beginning of the game, pays 3 mega credits per card that they want to add to their hand. The rest are discarded. One interesting thing about this game is that there's no hand limit. You can add as many cards as you want as long as you pay for them. Those first 2 phases, passing the start player marker and drawing cards, you don't do those during the first generation of the game because you accomplish those things during the game's setup. The third phase of a generation is the action phase, and this is where most of the meat of the game happens. During this phase, each player takes turns performing either 1 or 2 actions or passing. Once you've passed, you can't take any more actions for the rest of the generation. One of the actions that you can perform is playing a card from your hand. There are 3 different types of cards, but they all have a cost that you have to pay in the upper left-hand corner. Some cards also have an additional requirement that has to be in place before you can play the card. So this card requires the temperature to be at least negative 14 degrees Celsius when you play it. There might be other cards that say that the temperature can be no higher than negative 6 degrees. Or that there can be no more than 3 ocean tiles on the board when you play it. So you always have to check this requirement when you play a card. The red cards are sort of immediate action cards. You play them once, and then you turn them face down after you perform their effect, and they won't have any effect until end game scoring, if at all. The green cards, when you play them, you stack them on top of each other in front of you so that you keep the title and these tags visible, because these tags, this has a plant tag that could affect other cards over the course of the game. Blue cards provide you with actions or effects. So this card provides you with an additional action that you can perform during this action phase. You can perform that action once per generation. Other blue cards give you ongoing effects, which are always active. Another action that you can perform is completing one of these standard projects. So these are actions that are available to anyone. They allow you to sell cards from your hand for money, or to pay money to increase your energy production, raise the temperature, place an ocean tile, place a greenery tile, or build a city and increase your mega credit production. When you place an ocean tile, it has to be placed on one of these light blue spots that are reserved for oceans. A lot of spots on the board have a placement bonus, so if I place an ocean here, I get 2 plant resources as my bonus. Once this ocean is placed, I get to raise my terraform rating because I have increased one of the game's parameters. And also, once this is on the board, anytime someone places a tile adjacent to this ocean, they get a placement bonus of 2 mega credits. When you place a greenery tile, you have to place it next to a tile that you own if possible. If that's not possible, or if you don't own any tiles at all, you can put it wherever you want. When you place a greenery tile, you claim ownership of it by putting one of your player color cubes on that tile. You take any relevant placement bonuses, and then you increase the oxygen level by 1, which, as you remember, also increases your terraform rating. City tiles are used primarily to score points at the end of the game. When you place a city tile, you're generally not allowed to place it adjacent to any other city tile. When you place it on the board, you claim ownership of it and take any relevant placement bonuses, just like if you were placing a greenery tile. At the end of the game, greenery tiles are worth 1 point apiece. City tiles are worth 1 point apiece, plus 1 point for each adjacent greenery tile. You'll also notice that some of the parameter tracks have bonuses as well. So if you increase the temperature to negative 24 degrees Celsius, you get to increase your heat production. And if you're the one that gets the oxygen level up to 8%, you get to increase the temperature as a bonus. You can spend an action during the action phase to convert 8 plants into 1 greenery tile, which you place on the board following the normal placement rules. You can also spend an action to convert 8 heat into an increase in temperature. Finally, during the action phase, you can spend an action to claim a milestone or to fund an award. Claiming a milestone requires you to meet the prerequisites for that milestone. So if you wanted to claim the mayor milestone, you would have to own 3 cities. Or if you wanted to claim the gardener, you would have to own 3 greenery tiles. If you want to claim one of those, you spend an action, you spend 8 mega credits, and then you place one of your player markers on that milestone. It's worth 5 points at the end of the game, and only 3 of these can be claimed over the course of the game. And once you claim a milestone, no one else is able to claim that particular milestone either. Awards work similarly in that you have to pay for them to be funded. There are 5 possible awards, but only 3 of them can be funded over the course of the game. What's different about awards is that they are given to the player who has the highest of a certain criteria. So the landlord gives 5 points to the player who owns the most tiles at the end of the game. No matter who funded the award, the player who has the most owned tiles at the end of the game gets the 5 points, and whoever has the second most gets 2 points. The banker is awarded to the player who has the highest mega credit production at the end of the game, and so on. The first person to fund an award pays 8, while the second person to fund an award pays 14, and the third award funded would cost 20 to fund. After every player has passed, you proceed to the production phase. At the very beginning of the production phase, all leftover energy turns into heat. And then each player produces each resource in accordance with their current production value. The only exception to this is your mega credit production, where you add your current terraform rating to your current mega credit production, and that's how much money you receive during that production phase. Gameplay continues over a series of generations until the temperature has reached 8 degrees Celsius, the oxygen has reached 14%, and all of the ocean tiles have been placed on the board. Once all 3 of those conditions have been met, you finish the current generation, including one final production. Then players are given one last chance to convert their plants into greenery tiles, and then you add up players' scores by combining their terraform rating with any points that they get from milestones and awards. You also add up the points they get from their cities and greenery tiles and any special tiles that have been played as a result of cards over the course of the game. And finally, you add up the victory points on any cards to determine each player's final score. The solo game is played mostly according to the multiplayer game's rules, but with a few pretty big exceptions. The biggest exception is that your goal, rather than scoring a lot of points, is to fulfill the full extent of all 3 parameters before the end of the 14th generation. So in that time, you have to increase the temperature to 8 degrees, increase the oxygen to 14%, and place all of the ocean tiles on the board. If you do that within the specified time, you tally up your points to see how well you scored. Another change is that instead of starting at a terraform rating of 20, you start at a terraform rating of 14, which makes the beginning of the game a little bit slower. Before you draw cards for your starting hand, you place 2 neutral cities and greenery tiles on the board. And the way you do that is by drawing cards. So the first card that I draw is going to determine the position of the first city I place on the board. I'm going to look at the cost in the upper left-hand corner, and starting from this space in the upper left-hand corner of the board, I'm going to count off that many spaces, skipping over any illegal placements like these spaces that are reserved for oceans. So I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that's the cost of the card that I drew, and then I'm going to place a neutral city tile in that space. I draw another card to determine the position of the first greenery tile that I place, and so I'm going to place that. I'm going to follow the same rules of skipping placements, and I'm just going to start in the upper left and work my way clockwise around this tile. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to place a neutral greenery tile in that space. That greenery tile does not increase the oxygen level. Then I would draw 2 more cards and work my way from the bottom right to place another city and another greenery tile adjacent to that city before I start the game. In the solo game, you don't use milestones and you don't use awards. Finally, there is sort of an imaginary player that you can use over the course of the game to take resources from or decrease their production. So for example, this card requires you have to decrease your own mega credit production, and then you can decrease any player's heat production. So when you're playing solo, there's an imaginary player that you can decrease production for, so that you don't have to decrease your own production when you play a card like this. Terraforming Mars has a lot of player interaction, both in competition for the best spots on the board, and to a lesser degree in the way that the cards allow you to remove resources from your opponents or decrease their production. But the solo experience actually works really well, and I think that a lot of that is because the goals of the multiplayer game and of the solo game are so different. The end game conditions in the multiplayer game are your win conditions in the solo game. So throughout the course of the game, you're not preoccupied with scoring a lot of points and placing lots of cities on the board. You're just trying to increase the oxygen level and raise the temperature and place ocean tiles, which changes the game a lot. But I still think it works really well, and a lot of what makes it so great as a solo experience is that the solo game preserves all of the card combos and tableau building, which is what I love about the game. I do like the way that the area control on the board works. I like tile laying in general, and I like the competition for those placement bonuses, and I love the way that everyone wants to place their cities in areas that have lots of greenery surrounding them. But when the solo game's focus is shifted, I think it works just as well. And I think that there's a lot of replayability in the solo game too. In the multiplayer games that I've played, we've seen almost every card in the deck every time we've played. In the solo game, you won't see all of the cards. You'll see maybe half of them. And I think that that really increases the variability and the replayability of the game. And even just the different order in which you draw those cards can really shake things up. A big part of the game is knowing what cards are beneficial to play at what time. And in the solo game, there are more cards that are kind of useless because they depend on other players' things. But that kind of just increases the challenge of the game. I've also found that the solo game is a lot more economy focused, and when you're the only one that's changing the parameters on the board, your terraform rating has a lot of opportunities to go up, which increases your income during every production phase. So you have a lot of money, which gives you a lot of freedom to pay for placing oceans or greenery on the board or raising the temperature. And it's just a different experience all around. But in general, I've found that I love both the solo and the multiplayer experiences that this game offers. I am so excited. I'm so surprised at how much I like this game. And I'm so excited to get in more plays. If you love thematic Euros, if you love engine building, tableau building, if you love tile laying, this game has something, I think, for everyone, and I think that you should definitely check it out.